Laser screwdriver. Who'd have Sonic? So this is the video that I alluded to that I've been meaning to get around to a long time. And that is, I am finally gonna rank the Masters. Now, I've ranked the Doctors and the Companions years ago, like so long ago that I'm starting to consider revisiting and re-ranking them, adding in the newer folks who have come along since I last did those things. But I'm not setting any promises for when that's going to happen. But I'm well overdue to rank the Masters. And when I found out that John Simm was coming back for the end of Series 10 and that it was going to be the closeout for Missy, it felt like this is the time to rank the Masters. Now, I am restricting this to appearances in the show. Obviously, both classic era and modern Doctor Who. I'm not factoring in Big Finish stuff or anything like that. So that gives me 8. And I'm going to say it right now, I'm not counting the stand-in who was at the very beginning of the Doctor Who movie from the 90s. So forget about that, and we'll start right at the bottom. And since I brought up the Doctor Who movie from the 90s, occupying the bottom spot at number 8, Eric Roberts. I kind of feel bad for Eric Roberts. Not like in a, oh, he did fine, wait, he didn't do a great job. But the reason I feel bad is I think he probably had no idea who the Master was or what he was like, and was probably relying entirely on whatever the director told him. And you actually kind of feel that across that entire movie. Like, the only thing that feels like Doctor Who is the Doctor himself, Paul McGann, who did know Doctor Who and was aware of this character and the legacy and the importance of this, and it feels like nobody else involved in the thing did. But in any case, getting back to Eric Roberts, it actually feels like he's playing two different characters at different points in the movie. Starting out, he almost feels like he's trying to be the Terminator. He's got this odd, stilted, almost robotic way of speaking, and then later on he gets the he gets the full outfit and just the wow, dude, really? You can't take him seriously at that point. And there's a period in the middle between the really robotic and the really flamboyant where he's kind of okay, but he never really works because they botch the intro. He's just boring. And then at the end, you can't take that seriously. You just can't. He doesn't work. Moving on. Number 7, Peter Pratt. Now, Peter Pratt played the Master in The Deadly Assassin, which is a very good Doctor Who story. And the Master is very well conceived and very well used in that story. I'm still putting this performance way down at the bottom, though. And again, can't completely blame the actor. Different reason this time. This time the problem is the mask. Because, that thing, looking at a still image of it doesn't really do it justice. And when I say that, I mean, you look at a still image and go, hey, that's kind of cool. And as a still image, it is. But when you see it in the show and you realize those eyes never move and never blink, and you realize that mouth doesn't really move, but moves just enough to give away the fact that it should be moving more than it does. And he's trying to act through this mask that is basically just completely blocking him, and it's muffling his dialogue, not like to the point of Bane voice, but you can hear him like really forcing his voice to try and come through this thing, and it still sounds muffled. And I don't think anybody was going to make that mask work, if I'm being completely honest. And if I set the handicap that mask gives aside, he's fine. There's nothing really wrong with his performance. He's not really called upon to do all that much, but he's fine. But he's not good enough to make up for how much of a detriment that locked off, unblinking thing is. And unfortunately, because it muffles his voice, even though they show the face not very often, you can still hear. It still feels like a mask because he sounds like a person trying to talk through a mask. Doesn't work. Number 6, Anthony Ainley. I wished I could have put him higher up on this list, but I can't with a clear conscience, because he he was the master for quite a while. And he's not awful, but he's missing a really key element, and that is menace. He never really feels particularly threatening. Part of that's performance, part of that is also the writing, because the master had been around for a long time at that point, and the writers kept bringing him back, but kind of didn't know what to do with him at that point. And he suffered the problem that any recurring villain who can't be permitted to win has, which is that eventually they just become a buffoon because they just keep showing up and failing again and again and again and again and again. And that was happening to the master during Anthony Ainley's tenure, to the point that they had to introduce a new evil Time Lord with the Rodney to try and make up for the fact that the master, nobody could take him seriously anymore. He's best when he first shows up. He's pretty good in Logopolis and Castrovalva, but even there, like, it's not quite working. Again, he's got sort of the glee in evil, but again, he's just lacking the menace. He's lacking the threat. And also just all the stuff he does doesn't make sense. Like, as a plot, as a scheme. Logopolis is always one that jumped out at me, because like at the very end, and I'm not going to recount exactly how this works, but like he like out of nowhere decides he's going to hold the whole universe hostage and force every civilization to appoint him their ruler. And it's just, it kind of happens out of nowhere, and it's a plan that makes no sense, like on so many levels. And it's funny, it's something that I actually handle better now because of stuff that's happened in New Who. When they establish, the drums in his head and that he is crazy, not just in a the hero tells him, you're mad, you're insane, but like legitimately insane. I can now look back at these early things and go, well, of course he came up with an idea that's kind of dumb and doesn't really work. He had drums in his head, but wasn't the case at the time. It was just kind of not great writing and a performance that, yeah, he feels like how the master would be in the Saturday morning cartoon adaptation of Doctor Who, just slightly softened. We'll move along. Number 5, John Simm. Now, John Simm, you can really break down his appearances very easily into 3 segments. You had his appearance at the end of Series 3, at the end of the specials, and the end of Time, and at the end of Series 10. And every one is very distinct. And I can even, within his listing, I can rank those appearances very easily. At the top is the end of Time, in the middle is Series 10, at the bottom is Series 3. Now that's for me. I know other people really prefer how he first was when he first showed up in Series 3. For me, he's too manic. And I know that sounds weird for me to say because I said I enjoyed the fact that he is legitimately crazy, but he was a bit too sort of bouncy, wacky, I'm gonna kill people kind of thing. And it was weird, and it felt inconsistent with who the Master is, because who the Master is has felt much more rigid than who the Doctor is. Because the Doctor from generation to generation has kind of been free to shake it up a bit more. Now, that's not to say that you can't shake it up from one regeneration to the next with the Master, but it just, that sort of adding that to his personality, it just seemed too immature, and again, kind of cartoonish. It was, and I get the idea behind it because it was like he was matching the energy of David Tennant, who was a bit more bouncy and everything. So I get the theory behind it. It really didn't work for me. That said, I really do like his second appearance, and I really do like him in The End of Time. And I like him because he is legitimately cracking up and coming apart. And I think John Simm played that very well. And I get a lot more of that menace and the threat from him when I know that it's not just a matter of him coming up with an evil plan, but he's so unstable that he could just turn on a dime and just decide out of nowhere that he is going to do something that's even worse than like some sort of crazy scheme would be. And that's kind of what happens over the course of that story. And like I said, I like that so much that I can look back on earlier appearances that maybe seem a bit wonky and remind myself he's kind of crazy, and it makes it a little bit better. That's how much I like this aspect to the character at the point that it was introduced, and John Simm playing it it's just really good. And because there's also that sense of desperation to him, because he knows he's coming apart and he knows he's dying. That for me was his best work, and his work in Series 10 kind of falls in the middle. I think he was kind of underused as a presence, but it's good. It's solid. There's a little bit more of the menace to him, but he has just a little bit of the Stark. It's balanced much better. So like, if his appearance in Series 3 had been more in line with how he appeared in Series 10, honestly, he might be higher on the list, but he really doesn't work for me in Series 3, and that is dragging him down on this list. So let's move up from here. We get into the upper half with number 4, Jeffery Beavers. Now, as I said, I'm only taking the show into account here. I am not taking Big Finish audio into account, and if I were, he might rank higher. But I haven't heard a lot of Big Finish audio yet. It is stuff that I want to get around to, but I'm not going to put this list on hold while I catch up on that. So Jeffery Beavers in the show had one appearance as the Master and the Keeper of Traken, effectively playing the same version that Peter Pratt played, but doing it with a mask that actually allowed him to act, because he had his own eyes and it moved with his mouth, and he was able to just deliver a performance as opposed to just be a muffled voice behind a mask. And he's really good. A bit like my favorite turn that John Simm did, there's a desperation to him. And there's a feeling that his desperation, because he knows he's running out of time and his body's falling apart, there's a feeling that that desperation makes him more dangerous. And Jeffery Beavers just sells that really well in a fairly limited amount of screen time, in only one story. And it has made it so that when I get around to more Big Finish stuff, I want to prioritize some of his appearances as the Master in those, because I think he's really, really good. He delivered a performance that felt true to the character and felt like it was pushing it forward at the same time. And for a guy who just came in for a one-off gig, props to him, seriously. And that brings me to number 3, another guy who was a one-off in the gig, Jacobi. Now, he was actually the Master proper for a pretty short amount of time, if I'm being fair. And I try not to count his work as Yana too much in his ranking, but I have to a little bit, because the contrast of how sort of sweet and affable he was as Yana to then just turn on it, and I literally turn like that, turn to camera. There is more menace, and there is more, oh my God, we're in so much trouble. Just you can read in his face in that one turn to camera than most actors who play the Master manage in any part of their time in the part. He just, you look at that and you go, we are screwed. And his line delivery is a little arch in terms of, I am the Master. But again, I think largely because it's comparing to just how sweet he was before, it feels like it's almost like he needs to overcompensate how evil he is to make up for the fact that he was sweet a few seconds ago. And I really wish we could have gotten some time with him as the Master legitimately. There was a time when I just wish he hadn't regenerated into John Simm at all, and that Jacobi had been the Master through that entire story. Because I like John Simm's second appearance in The End of the Time so much, I don't feel that way anymore. I do feel that ultimately it was worth it to have John Simm. But for a while, I kind of would have happily chucked John Simm out the window to get more Jacobi. He's really good. So, we're up to the top 2. And obviously, we lose some tension, because if you know who's played the Master, then you know who's left. And when I say number 2, that also means you know my number 1. But we're going to take the time to talk about number 2 properly anyway before we speed through. Number 2, Michelle Gomez as Missy. I love Missy. I love almost everything about Missy. I love how playful she is, and yet she's unpredictable. She always feels dangerous. And while she doesn't necessarily have that same sense of menace I talked about, she manages to still feel threatening. Not in a intimidating, I will kill you way, but you never feel safe around her. And I think that was really well established when she killed Oswin. Because up to that point, when she first showed up, she was sort of light and playful, and you were like, this incarnation of the Master is kind of fun. And then she killed Oswin, who was a character I think fans had immediately embraced and had loved. And it was a harsh, slap across the face. Don't get comfortable with her. She is dangerous. And Michelle Gomez never lost that edge from there on. And here's the other thing, and this is a really big thing that these last two have, I think, over the others, and that is chemistry with the doctor she was opposite to. She and Capaldi have such good chemistry, not only as villains, but as friends. And I've always loved that aspect. And that was another part of, especially Anthony Ainley, that really didn't work, is you lost the sense that he used to be the Master's friend. And you lost that sense of the Doctor wishing that he could bring him back. And you got that with Missy and the 12th Doctor. And they are so good together, and they sell the idea that maybe she is coming around, and yet it never felt like a cop-out, because she kept sliding back, and even when she's trying to be good, she's still being kind of a jerk about it, and she's still kind of almost going about goodness in an evil way, if that makes sense. It's like her alignment has gone from chaotic evil to lawful evil or something. It's fascinating, and it's just so much fun to watch. And I'm really sorry we're not going to be getting any more of her. But if you know your Masters, you know the actors who played them, then you already know my number one. Roger Delgado. The first, the original, the best. And I do honestly think Roger Delgado is the best. He just immediately epitomizes everything that the Master should be. He is charismatic, he is menacing, he is suave, he is diabolical, and he has such good chemistry with Jon Pertwee as the third Doctor. And that really is a big key. And again, you do get that feeling when they interact with each other, that sense from both of them, that slight sense of, I wish we didn't have to fight. And that just combined with Delgado owning this role. I mean, there's a reason they kept coming back to the Master, and that is because he landed it so perfectly right out of the gate. And his chemistry with Jon Pertwee is such that Pertwee himself said that Delgado's death, unexpected death by car crash, was part of what led him to decide to leave the show, because he had been back and forth on the idea up to that point, but once that happened, he's like, I really liked working with him. I can't keep doing this without him. And you get that when they're in scenes together, and even episodes that aren't great, because not every episode he was in was great, but whenever the two of them are on screen together, it's electric. The Master really was conceived as the Moriarty to the Doctor, Sherlock Holmes, and you feel that template very much in Delgado's performance, but it works. It's just spot on. It works. They nailed it out the gate. And even though there have been other Masters, some of whom I love, I don't think there's ever going to be one quite as perfect as Roger Delgado. And so that is my ranking for the different performers who have played the Master on Doctor Who. What is your ranking for the Masters? Or do you just want to slag me off and tell me I'm an idiot because I put this person up high or this person down low? Whatever you want to do, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I am also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.